All right, we are live. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to interview Andrea Cojocaru. She is co-founder and CEO of Numena. When I think about people influential in VR world, I like Andrea is top of my head, and she's posting amazing content on LinkedIn, Twitter, and I listen to her podcast on other platforms, and it's very inspiring. So thanks a lot, Andrea, for your time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me today.
All right. So, Andrea, can you share your journey from architecture to VR world? What were some moments which made you realize that uh, I should transition in and I should learn software development VR?
So, how far back should I go? Honest question.
Like from your bachelor's or master, like school. Yeah.
Okay, that's a long time ago. So, let's start from grad school. So, when I was in grad school, I was super excited about the usual stuff that architects are excited about in school, which is the whole theoretical stuff and your project being about more than just walls and space and about some kind of ideas. So that was great. But there was always an elephant in the room for me. And although I had an amazing education and amazing teachers, I felt that this elephant in the room was never addressed. I've never had anyone talk about it or point out as an issue. And what was the elephant? The elephant was the fact that we always talked about plans. About 50% of the time, we talked about the graphic qualities of plans and sections. Teachers would get super excited about how nice the poche looks or how beautiful the contrast in this corner and that corner is. And the other half of the time, we weren't talking about ideas, but in a very abstract kind of way. And then we were really talking about, well, how pretty and cool the whole building looks like, the object, as if it was some kind of sculpture. And that was it. And the missing thing was the fact that we never really talked about spatial qualities. So it's like, hello, the plan can be the most beautiful thing, but its architecture is not graphic design. So actually it doesn't really matter. It's all about how a concept that gets carried through the phenomenology of space. And there were two things. I think there are two reasons behind this lack. One, the word phenomenology when I was in grad school, which is a long time ago, was not a good word, at least in the school that I went to. So the head of the phenomenological movement in architecture was Peter Zumthor. And the kind of teachers that I had in grad school were more into the other camp, more about rationalism, and they were looking at people like Derrida to kind of so they were into the philosophical movement that had to do with the rational approach to permutations and tectonics and things like that. So they're looking down upon people with an agenda about how the space feels like. And the second issue, I think, why we just never went there is because we never had any kind of tool that would allow us to have any kind of objectivity about how a space that someone drew in plan could possibly feel like when you were there in 3 dimensions. So it would have been a pretty frustrating discussion where everyone would have talked about what that space looks like in their head, but with just no way of sharing that experience. So the lack of a tool that would allow us to pursue this kind of methodology and this kind of discourse, I think, led to the silence that I was dealing with. But it was nonetheless very frustrating because for me, the concept of a building has to do with just the experience of that space. So then fast forward through a few jobs and big offices and smaller offices, and I always had the feeling that something is missing for me. So I was working in some of the world's top architecture offices. Like I was in New York designing skyscrapers in Bangkok, and it felt like what can be cooler than that? So objectively speaking, I was kind of where I always wanted to be. And then I was still not that happy. So then I moved to Europe and I was like, okay, maybe it's American capitalism that's making me so unhappy and everything that comes with that and life in New York. So I took a year break and I moved to Germany, where I was a project manager for an apartment building project in Prague. And then I thought, okay, this is gonna fix everything because what's cuter than Europe and what's like more beautiful than Prague, and designing a building in Prague is like amazing. But there was still something missing for me. So it's been a bit of a very long journey in trying to figure out what's missing and why am I not happy. And of course, tons of architects are not happy and the reasons in many cases are common reasons, but I was still having a hard time to put a finger on exactly what's missing for me and how I could possibly add that to my architectural career. So one day a friend of mine got an invitation to go visit a VR studio in Stuttgart. And he had no interest in it and forwarded me the invitation. And I was like, hey, Andrea, do you want to go check this out? Because like, I just don't have time for it. And I thought it was kind of cool. I didn't really know exactly what VR was then. This was maybe 6 years ago or something, 5, 6 years ago. So I went and I was super lucky to have my first experience, my first encounter with VR be with a DK2. So that's like the developer kits for Oculus before the official release of Oculus, and not cardboard, right? Like I think if the first experience I had with VR would have been cardboard, I would just not be here today, because that's just crap. So I put this headset on and I was on top of a high-rise building in some kind of Gotham city, and these guys were working on a VR demo kind of application for one of the German car manufacturers. And so there was a car there and this like Gotham City kind of thing. And I was just blown away by what that technology was. Like I have never in my life been just so impressed by something. And I'm like, I'm not one of the I'm not the kind of person that's like easily impressed by like anything. Basically, I just go through life be like, oh, okay. But this just blew me away, and then after a few minutes, the first thing that came to my mind was, oh, this Gotham City could look a lot better. It's like not amazing. And then the second thing that came to mind was, okay, what is this thing that I'm seeing? It's actually a combination of two things. It's 3D models that come in are designed by a designer and in a 3D software, and then somehow you need some kind of coding because you need to be adding behaviors on top of that. And when I was super young, I was coding. This was way before architecture. This was like 80s, like way back. And I was learning how to code with my dad. So something just clicked in my head, and I was like, okay, I got this, because I know how to do 3D stuff. I'm an architect, and I've always had a feeling that I can kind of code, so maybe it's worth a shot. So I quit my job, and I lived off my savings for 6 months, to learn Unity and to learn C#, and to try to see how much of my coding skills I can get back. And then after that, we were just amazingly lucky that we found a company here in Germany that just wanted a VR thing. That heard about this VR stuff, and they knew that I'm kind of figuring out VR, and they're like, hey, do you wanna give this a shot? And I said, sure. And that's just kind of how we got started.
I see. There's so much stuff to unpack, and it's so insightful and inspiring. So I feel that like when you mention about your like grad school, you're representing design, and it's not a graphic skill. It's like translating your spatial like experience. So I also felt the same when you have some vision in your head, you translate it into 3D and like 2D graphics, and then you're communicating with your professor. And it's not necessary that 100% of your vision is being communicated to them, so because you are not in the same real time experience. So I totally agree with that. But I'm also wanted to know, like, what were the challenges, like, while learning coding or getting into the VR space? Because now you're also competing with other like 3D artists or game designers or film modeling artists. So how did you find your spot?
You mean challenges while I was learning, or how we are positioning ourselves as a company now with respect to the other companies?
Like both.
Hmm. So challenges learning. Well, it's like not easy to learn game engine, and it's not easy to learn C sharp. So, but looking back, I actually wouldn't really call it like I just like no challenge that comes to mind. I mean, of course, in those days, everything was even a bigger mess than it is now, which is means like everything was running with Steam VR. We only had the Oculus. No, actually there was Oculus, and there was like the HTC Vive, the first Vive. You would The order in which you would plug in the cables into the link box would matter. So you would like restart, if something was not working, you just restart everything. And then there were like these ridiculous entries on forums and instruction, like even official instructions be like, oh, did you try to first plug in that cable and then the other cable? So we're dealing with a lot of stuff like that. I feel like half of my time was spent just like restarting everything to just to get something to run. So that was super hard. So dealing with a game engine, a new technology that's not really working, but then sometimes you don't even know if it's your fault or like it's just not working, and learning C sharp in the same time. I mean, doing all those three things in parallel was like quite a ride. But every time I did get it to run and I would put on the headset and see in VR something that I had placed in Unity was like a miracle. Like I feel like despite all that frustration, everything to me was just amazing. I was just blown away. I was like, oh my God, there's a cube in a space. Like even now I find that to be just the most mind-blowing thing I have seen. So from an architectural perspective, I feel just so blessed to live at a time where humanity has invented synthetic immersive space. We've never had that before. So as architects, to design at one-to-one scale in a synthetic space, it's just holy shit, this is gonna change everything. So even today, I would go into an empty Unity scene and put a cube there and just look at it. And then I can think of stuff like, well, where is this cube? What is this space? Where am I right now? What does this all mean? So that was kind of that learning journey. And then in terms of how we are positioned now and still trying to figure out what we do and how we communicate to everyone what Numena does, it's a work in progress. We're figuring it out because basically I started this company not just with the idea that we're going to do VR development, but that we're going to do VR development, well, but with two things. So with the idea that we will do VR development as architects. And that's still what separates us from all the other studios. So we approach everything we do as architects. We think about UI as architects, we design buttons as architects, we conceptualize everything as architects. So even we have this big medical instruments company from Germany that's one of our kind of ongoing clients, and they want us to do training applications for medical equipment, and we design virtual hospitals for them, and we think of the interactions and everything as an architect would, designing that training facility. So we're not just designing the actual coding the actual interactions for the training program, but we're thinking of that as an entire spatial experience that includes hospitals and peoples and doors and circulation and all of that. So that has worked out amazingly well for us. And it has really helped us as a small company with no marketing budget in the beginning to stand out from what other VR studios were doing. And the other thing that I think makes us a bit more unique, I also started this company with the idea that I don't want to give up traditional architecture. Let's call it traditional architecture. So it was a bit about me just being stubborn, because a lot of people were saying a lot, well, people were saying a lot of stuff, right? People always say a lot of stuff. So they're like, well, Andrea, you're an architect. Coding is not that easy. Are you just going to start to code? Like, that's just not going to work out. And then people are like, well, what is this company doing? Are you an architect? Are you coding stuff? Are you doing software development? Like, what is this thing? How are you going to pull this off? And I was like, no, 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 I don't want to give up designing physical buildings. And of course, it's an insane proposition, because the kind of base knowledge you need to get a physical building to happen, I mean, the knowledge you need for that, it's already like just out of control and getting more and more. And the kind of knowledge you need to get a software product out the door, and to do that in a new technology, it's again just like a massive amount of base knowledge you need to have. So but somehow that's just what I wanted to do, and I wasn't like ready to compromise. And I think that's also slowly starting to pay off. So basically what we're doing is we're just exploring notions and concepts that have to do with space, and we design spatial experience, and we do not differentiate between that spatial experience being 100% grounded in physical reality, or that spatial experience being a virtual experience, or some kind of mixture of the two.
I see. Building upon that, like, what were the resistance or faced from the industry when you were developing this kind of tools and experiences? Like, and who are your clients? Are they like developers or architects?
So right now we have two types of clients. We have companies that need VR or AR applications, and there's quite a bright range of clients that we have. So we have industrial clients that I mentioned, but lately we've started to work with museums to do AR and VR experience in museums, and I totally love that, because we have like full creative freedom, and we deal a lot with concepts of like artistic concepts, and museum people are super open to those kind of stuff. And the other type of client we have are just people who need architectural services. So people who come to us for that, and we take on only the type of architectural project where the client is also interested in VR, and willing to try VR workflow together with us. So we're fortunate to be able to be picky about that and choose the right kind of clients for physical architecture projects.
I see. And like you have worked both in the like traditional industry sense and in your company. So like what kind of different feedback you saw from client when they were doing projects with VR and without VR?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a very everything about it is different. So the relationship that the client has with the work is different. The relationship the client has with you as an architect is also very different. So what you were saying earlier, how you get an idea of a building in your mind, and then you have to communicate that using drawings and maybe some renderings, but it's never exactly what you have in your mind. Like there's always something missing. So you're basically using certain levels of abstraction to communicate what is a very complex immersive experience. So you're going up the abstraction ladder and then abstracting it to lines. And when a client is confronted with that, they have to have the mental ability to reconstruct from that abstraction the entire complexity of that spatial experience. And I mean, most of the time, I mean, they're just not going to do it. Most of the time, even we as architects don't do it. I mean, we lie that we see things while looking at plans. I mean, sure, but like not really, because the cognitive effort needed to completely reconstruct from a plan a three-dimensional experience in all its shades and lights and complexities is just way too high. So we do it a little bit, but not really. And people also vary just widely in their cognitive ability to reconstruct that spatially. There are people that cannot even see spatial things in their brains at all, including people with what's called aphantasia, who cannot see images in their minds at all. And this is a pretty big, it's turning out that it's now like in the like 1-digit percentages of the population. So forget about people not being able to reconstruct spirit space. There are people who don't see images in their minds and think in other ways. So the client is looking at these things and has to have an opinion about them. And it actually, everything ends up being in the hands of the project leader or the project manager and their presentation skills, right? So in a traditional architecture office, you always have people that are very good at presentations, who are not necessarily the people that figure out the details or how the truck is going to pull in and out, but they're just very good at presenting. And what it is that they're presenting and how it is that they're selling is like a whole other discussion. But all of that is being turned upside down now, because you don't show, there's no more need to show the client drawings and stuff like that. You just put them in VR and you save them the cognitive effort of reconstructing the space. And it's just a completely different kind of conversation, and the kind of suggestions and the kind of thing that they feel they have an opinion on have changed completely, right? So before they would ask questions like, okay, so where is this bedroom? Is there going to be enough light? Oh, I want the bathroom to be closer to that area of the house. Because that was the range of issues they felt confident that they understood. And now in VR, the range of issues they feel comfortable discussing is just became huge.
I see. So it not only led to better communication, but also like maybe fewer design iterations because they got understood the spaces better. So I have like a question, like based on the point you spoke earlier about phenomenology. So how do you carry like sensory involvement in VR space? So if I'm not wrong, one could play with visual and sound, but like how do you try to get phenomenology in your VR spaces?
So we have visuals and we have sound. We don't try to put the other ones. We're waiting for all the great companies working on haptic suits and haptic gloves and all the fun sci-fi stuff. I think it's coming soon. We had some of these companies send us like haptic gloves to try. I feel like that's not at a point where we could introduce it to our clients, but personally, I'm happy with just having visuals and sounds. So for me, that's enough to allow us to talk in terms of phenomenology and just how it feels to be in a certain space and the spatial qualities that you just don't have access to in a plan.
Got it. So I think this might be a good time to see some live demo of how you design in VR.
All right. So let's see. I'm going to share my screen so it's working.
Is the headset your own brand?
No. Oh, no. It just has, so we don't make hardware. This one just has our sticker on it.
Okay.
All right. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So basically this is, let me just pull back a bit. So this is the kind of environment that we work in. And all the elements that you see here are kind of adjustable. So you can make any kind of changes to this environment that you like. Including, we have ways of like working using layers and to kind of mimic a little bit the workflow that you would have with software such as Rhino. You can just move this stuff around. And the whole concept behind this is that you simultaneously have access to the building at one-to-one scale and also in this small version. So I could go in and look at things and make design decisions, but two different, oh, here, these are the walls that I just moved. So if I look right of me, see now I'm moving this little wall in the in what we call the sandbox, but if I'm looking right, I can see the wall moving at one-to-one scale. And the idea here is to combine the cognitive advantages that you have from having like a bird's eye or God's view over what you're doing. So like a rational set of mind where you see everything from the top and you can think rationally about where everything should go, but then you immediately see how the space changes at one-to-one scale. So we have a duplicate basically of the entire scene that you see here, and then you see here where there's an adjustable scale. And let me see if I can go to this guy. So this is one of our projects. There you go. Now I'm gonna change to this. So this is a rooftop with penthouses. And the roof here is actually imported from Rhino. So we did not make this in a VR application. It would have been very just tedious to do it in VR. So for some parts of the design process is definitely, you're definitely faster with a mouse and a keyboard. Although you can like select stuff in here as well and kind of like move them around. So what we do is we bring some elements in here and then, oh, sorry, oh, that's something else. We bring some elements in here, then we play around, we just kind of make everything be a little bit messy. And when we get an idea, if it's something as complicated as this roof structure, then we just take it, we export this in Rhino, and then we clean it up and do proper spacings of everything and in Rhino. But this is also the kind of place that we would use to meet with our structural engineer and talk about things. And then the part where this becomes interesting for clients is where they're here and they can even come here themselves and like just change the walls. So for example, they can decide where they want this wall to be and then move it around. And they have also an understanding of where the structure is. They can play with repositioning furniture. So this is the part about VR and this application that is just accessible to a lot of people because the UI and the way it's used is just so easy. We also have, I think there's a hole on this wall. Yeah, there you go. So you can also just reposition openings of whatever kind. So here we just have an opening. We did not add a door yet. And yeah, this is the kind of stuff I was talking about earlier. So what we experience here is not just that clients can understand things quite easily, but in many cases they come in here and they just move stuff themselves.
And if you move like opening, does it also the sunlight is also like changed accordingly?
Yes. Let's find something. that is, because there's no direct sunlight coming in there. Sorry. Yeah, you can kind of see the shadows on the floor. See, yeah. I'm trying to see where it might be a better place to see that. But I can also show you. So if I bring this back here, I have to stand up. I can basically grab the sun and look at the shadows on the floor.
Oh, nice.
So let's see. Yeah, you clearly see the shadows moving on the floor. So people can come in here themselves, and then like this is kind of like late afternoon. Of course, we don't really have any cover on the roof, but if everything was kind of closed in, then you could place your window openings and then use this tool to figure out where how the light would behave at different times of the day. All right. Anything else that you're curious about this environment?
I was wondering, so what are like some features one could edit and one couldn't edit? So for example, wall thickness, texture can be edited, but like what are some limitations?
Okay, let me come out of VR and then I can answer that. So, okay, I'm gonna have like markings on my face from the headset. I'm sorry about that. That's why I don't want to stay in there for too long, because I'm gonna come out with like looking like a raccoon. Let me get out of play mode. All right, so everything you mentioned could be added, and a lot of that we have, and a lot of that we're working on. So we're working on menus that would allow us to vary the thickness of the wall and all of that. So is there anything else you could think of that, and then you can ask me and I can tell you if we can add it or not.
So let's say like there is like a furniture family from Revit or Rhino. So either one can scale scale it symmetrically in all the dimensions. But what if like I wanna like modify the contour and texture of that sofa or something?
Yes, you can do that. So you can. So the sofa is a mesh, right? And this application is not a mesh modeling tool. We could stretch it. So we could allow you to stretch it in the 3 axes, but the application does not support you going in and actually rebuilding edges like you would in Rhino or Blender.
Got it. And by the way, I must say it was a great demo and I loved it. It was quite interesting. So Sujay has a question. Can we do animation in VR, or is it like possible to do actions like turning off light or turning on?
Yes, so we have lights that you can turn on and off, artificial lights. If you mean doing animations, do you mean it like in an editor with keyframes and everything? So if that's what you mean, then no, but it could be added. The reason why we're not doing that now is because we have to be very careful with what's the scope of this application. If we start including things like mesh modeling and keyframe animation, then I mean we just can't have everything in with a small team, because we would end up trying to do Revit and Rhino and Blender and into one thing, and maybe at one day, but not now.
I see. And like you showed us the manipulation with the sun angle and position. So I'm wondering, can we like add additional environmental analysis results? So one could like, let's say turn on, change the position of sun and see what's the amount of lux in different pixel or grid.
Yes, so now one of the things that we're working on is to add a sustainability engine, where we are right in the middle right now of trying to figure out what are the first things we're going to tackle, how we're going to display them. But yes, there will be some amount of that available to you. Of course, we're not going to be able to do super complex calculations, the kind of calculations stability engineers send to some random farm and get the results the next day, because it's a real-time application. So it has to be stuff we can compute quite fast. And now the demo that I did is running on my gaming laptop with like a super expensive NVIDIA graphic card, but the actual application runs on an Oculus Quest, which has like a cell phone processor in it. So we can only go as far as a cell phone processor and not even an app, but like an iPhone would allow us to go.
I see. And I'm wondering, let's say if there are like multi players in that same space and two players are stretching the wall, like how does it override one's edit or something?
So yeah, we're also in the middle of adding multiplayer. We're gonna have that in 2-3 months, I hope. The way we are thinking of implementing that is we're gonna ask for user input to determine who has the control. So there's gonna be no such conflicts because we're gonna make sure that there is one person that is the presenter, the so-called presenter or owner of the scene, and then this person has to willingly give control over making changes, active changes to the scene to someone else. So there would be no two people that can simultaneously move stuff.
I see. And I'm just wondering, so right now it's like about the processor. So is it possible to also deploy it on web-based, like on a cloud server and interaction on a web like browser?
So WebVR is super early right now. Like they're the early phases of that technology, and a lot of people are working on making that happen. It's not at the point where such an application could run on it. Maybe one day.
Awesome. Okay, I see. So I wanted to ask like few questions on the hospital project you did. Can you see my Chrome screen?
Yes.
Okay. So can you tell us about this project and like the process of developing this?
Yeah, so the client for this project is B. Brown, and B. Brown is one of the world's largest manufacturers of medical equipment. And one of the daughter companies that B. Brown has is producing all sorts of disinfectants that are used in the hospital. So these are disinfectants for hands, for surfaces, and all of that. This particular application was about was about training medical staff to understand what kind of disinfectants and products need to be used and how inside the surgical ward. And SSI stands for surgical site infections. A huge, like a 2-digit percentage of patients that undergo surgery end up getting a surgical site infection, even in very rich countries like Germany. And the reason for that is because these surgical site infections can be produced by almost everyone. So if any person that is around the patient touches something without having the right gloves, or even picks up a blanket without having disinfected their hands with a specific product first, that can result in an infection in that patient. So this company has tried to implement a lot of measures, and they have some amazing guidelines and brochures with graphics and everything to try to explain to the staff just how complex this situation is to take down the number of infections that happen. But because it's just such a so many factors are involved, it's very hard to see progress. So they got the idea of using VR for this, because in VR you can just show a lot of complexity without having to just write down 500 pages to just explain everything. So we're back to the conversation with levels of abstraction, right? If you try to communicate this kind of spatial complexity where danger can come from any direction, in a graphical format or in a text, it's the person that you're trying to communicate this with to has to reconstruct the environment in their minds. So we said, okay, let's just not try to abstract this, and let's use VR as a mode of communication where we just give them the environment. And then in this environment, they can then train and try to learn what has to be done everywhere. And one of the key aspects of this was the following. Usually someone does something wrong, but you only find out that the patient got the infection 1 to 2 weeks later. And there is no way of figuring out who made the mistake. And there's also no way of giving the person who made the mistake feedback at the time when they made the mistake. And even if normally they use videos, right, to communicate these kind of concepts. But again, in a video, you learn by watching the video. But again, there's no way of getting feedback while you're actually doing it. And in VR, we give feedback. The application tells every user the second they made a step that was not okay. So the second they touch something without having first put the right kind of gloves on or disinfected their hands with the right product, the application tells them that immediately. So we in the company, we're very excited about this particular use case for VR, because in many cases you hear things like VR training is 80% as efficient as actual training and things like that. But in this case, what VR training gives you is something that no other form of training could have given you, which is immediate feedback when the mistake happened in a three-dimensional environment.
I see. And I believe like this is a great use case of VR. I'm wondering, like, hospital has a lot of elements like 3D modeling. So like it might be a bit time consuming task to create all these assets.
Well, what's happening right now is new hospitals that are being built already own 3D models of their building. So the idea is to have to just use, well, it's the whole composition of the digital twin, right? So this would be a way in which you take the 3D model that the architect has produced in Revit, and then you bring it into a game engine, and you have that simulation used for training purposes. So you have the real hospital, and then you prepare staff by first training them into the virtual hospital.
Got it. And so many times like the Revit or Rhino models of big projects get very heavy. So do you do like model cleaning where you like maybe remove details to make it lightweight, so for a good or faster real-time experience?
So there are a lot of plugins for both Unity and Unreal, the two major game engines, that optimize that. So we don't have to do it manually anymore.
I see. And I know like you have a lot of amazing projects on your website. So is there any other project you would like to talk about?
Oh, let's see, go to projects. Go to architecture and click on Arthur. So this is a recent project. We still have to upload more more shots here and a trailer. If you can, yeah, if you just stay to the top, or yeah, this one is also good. This was a virtual building that we designed for a company that is developing a social VR platform for businesses. So people come and do meetings and presentations with their clients or between departments in these virtual office spaces. So this was very interesting to work on because we had to ask the very difficult question, kind of ominous. What is virtual architecture? So what is architecture without gravity and materiality? And that's actually very hard for an architect. And the more experience you have as a physical architect, I don't want to say real, as a physical traditional architect, the harder it is to imagine architecture without gravity and without materials, right? So basically 90% of your education and hard-earned intuition just has to go out the window.
I see. And like if you come from that background, you have like some mindset about okay making it feasible and like working with gravity. So it's going like you have so much freedom in a virtual space. So yeah. So I wanted to know, so we have like a non-linear process of designing and architecture for physical spaces. Uh, for your design in virtual spaces, like what is the workflow from like concept, sketch to VR development?
Well, we use our application, what I just showed you. So that's the reason why we started making that. So we first started by sketching and then putting things into Rhino, which is how I usually start, and then putting it in VR. And we would look at it in VR and get ideas about changes, then go back to Rhino and then bring it back in VR. And that was very frustrating to us because we really wanted to move things in VR. And that's how we slowly started to build up groups of functionality and scripts that we kept adding, a bit like plugins to our Unity projects that would allow us to just move stuff in the editor while in play mode. So we could skip the Rhino part. And it became, I mean, it's a little bit magical when you can move things at one-to-one scale and then witness the changes of that. It's very strange. It's very hard to explain in words. It's one of those things that you just kind of have to experience it, right? It's phenomenology. But we ended up thinking about the actual design process and how you generate ideas in very, very different ways.
I see. And I must say, like whenever like I see you answering about VR questions, I could feel the sense of passion you have for VR. You are very excited and eager to talk. So I want to know, like, is there any role model or people you look up to who are VR designers or developer?
I think there are a lot of people that I admire, but there's, I feel like there's no one that's working on the same set of problems that I'm working on. So I think the answer is no in terms of is there someone that's kind of doing things that I want to do or that I'm working on. I think no.
That's interesting because if there is no role model, then how do you have like do like learning path? So if there are no references or some past like precedents, like if you want to do something and you are stuck, how do you deal with that?
Oh, I see. I think this is. part of knowing yourself. So specific, like you asked about software development, but in architecture also, I never had a role model and I never had a mentor. For some reason, the kind of things that I was super interested in, I just never found anyone that was addressing those exact issues head on. So I, yeah, I never had anyone that was like, I have to go work for this person. I really love what they're doing. When I was in when I was in undergrad, I really liked Tadao Ando. So Tadao Ando is the only architect that came close to me in terms of being a role model. And I remember I wrote a letter to him when I was a sophomore in college saying, "Can I please come and intern with you?" But I never sent it.
Oh.
So yeah, so that was it. And after that, my interest then diverged even more from the type of architecture that he's doing and the way he's thinking about it. So how do I get unstuck? I feel like that only happens with time. It's about developing your own creative process and just knowing yourself and how your mind works and how you deal with that process. I don't think this is something that another person can necessarily teach you. But again, I never had a mentor, so I don't know. I'm sure it works for some people who do have a mentor and who are taught these kind of stuff. I never took that path, so I always just try to have a methodology about how I design and how I get myself unstuck. The issue I have with people giving advice or helping you in these situations is a bit what I was going into earlier, which is we have fundamentally different brains. So cognitively, we are built in wildly different ways. And there is zero conversation about this that I'm aware of in the architectural profession. I went through some amazing architecture schools and I was never asked, what kind of stuff do you see in your mind? I was never given a cognitive test. No one even asked me, are you designing with words, with sounds? Do you see images? Do you see stuff in 3D? So how can we give advice to someone else when we don't even know what is the cognitive landscape that that person lives in? It turns out like two digit a two-digit percentage of the population sees only very fundamental, like shady kind of images in their minds. So yeah, there are just a lot of issues with giving advice about those kind of things.
I see. That's a that's a great point. Yesterday, we had a session where we were discussing the neuroscience applications in architecture, and I feel that like there are like some questions and some important aspect which has a lot of potential in architecture education, but hasn't been integrated. I want to know your opinion on like future trends you see in VR space. Like, uh, I remember your tweet about metaverse and thoughts on that. And so, what are you excited about?
I'm excited about seeing a lot of discussions in the VR community that are not about the metaverse. I'm excited about the not metaverse. So there's a lot of fuss being made right now about this. Facebook, I think it's starting. It has started about 2 months ago with Facebook declaring that they're not a social media company anymore, that they're a metaverse company because they're pushing the VR space so much. And that just really got everyone interested and up in arms and questioning, and everyone all of a sudden has a definition of the metaverse, and everyone's asking me, what do you think is the metaverse? Everyone and their mother are quoting Ready Player One, which completely baffles me because even if you did not read the book, which you should have read the book, but even if you just watched the movie, that's a freaking dystopia. That's like horrendous. And then you have like top magazines and newspapers citing Ready Player One as the future we're heading towards, as if it's some amazing thing. And I'm like, have we not watched the same thing? Have we not read the same thing? So I am just flat out scared by the somewhat blindness with which the media and a lot of the people are welcoming uncritically this concept of the metaverse and everything that's being built around it right now. So I'm excited about a resistance to some of these uncritical and uncriticized ideas that starting to be formed in the VR community, and about alternative ways of talking about what's happening in the metaverse and alternative applications or goals of VR for the future. That's just not about dystopian things or mega corporations, things like that.
I see. So, what's your utopian vision for that?
What's my utopian vision for VR? It's a place. So I believe, if you follow my tweets, you know that I believe in what I call a life across realities. So I don't believe there will be one metaverse or virtual world. I believe there will be many of them, and physical reality will not have a privileged position. There's not going to be a hierarchy like this is physical reality, and then we go into these things just like we go into different internet sites. I think physical reality is just going to be one of the many types of realities and many types of experience that we're going to live across. So my utopian version is a world in which we are cognitively able to switch between multiple realities without negative side effects.
Interesting. Rahul has a question. Any thoughts about how AI can change things in VR, like generative spaces conducted by hybrid design decisions by human machines?
I think AI is going to be huge in these multiple realities, because in this, I don't want to call them alternative realities, because I think a VR world is as real as this world. Is just a different medium than physical materiality. I think in these non-physical worlds, we're going to deal with a multitude of agents and agencies. So we are going to be there as entities, but we are going to live there together with AI entities of many different kinds. And we are going to be experimenting as human entities with forms of agency that are much brighter than the forms of agency that we have now. And that's also going to be enabled by AI. So AI is going to play two roles in these non-physical worlds. One, they're going to augment our agency, so we're going to be able to do all sorts of stuff. And two, they're going to be agents like us.
That's quite interesting. Uh, I wanted to ask like question which Sujay asked earlier, that you are using Unity for your development. So is there any reason you chose Unity over Unreal?
When we started, Unity was much friendlier to indie developers. The forums, even today, the forums for getting help on the programming side for Unity are just exploding with solutions and answers and opinions. And if you ask a coding question on an Unreal forum is like 2 answers saying, yeah, I don't know, I've also not figured it out. So it looks like, I mean, things are shifting very, very fast. So just take what I say with a grain of salt and this awareness that we're moving at light speeds through these things right now. It's still a little bit the case that Unreal looks better than Unity, and it's very attractive for designers, cinematographers, architects, who care about the visual quality and who can do things very fast. So Unreal comes with embedded visual scripting editor. Whereas Unity, you just have to code in C#. There are some plugins, but basically the main way to do it is you just code in it. And that coding part makes it a little bit harder to kind of jump on board, but it's very attractive to indies. And another reason, a few years ago, I think that's still the case, but don't quote me on it. Most of the indie mobile applications were done in Unity and not in Unreal. So Unity had about over 80% of the indie mobile development market.
I see. One thought I had is like when you since the device allows like modeling in like digital space and anyone can do it using like as you showed in the interface. So if you give the same platform to kids versus adults, like have you seen like major differences on how they approach modeling or spatial experience?
That's a good question. I don't know. We haven't given it to any kids who will try that at some point. Yeah.
Got it. And I see a lot of people like in VR and art space where they are creating 3D models and like minting an NFT. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts on NFT, and do you plan to create special spaces for blockchain?
Yes, but I'm still waiting to see where things are going. So I'm following what's happening. I think there's still a lot of hype going on right now. But I definitely think it's something that's just it's here to stay. So in the future, yes, we will, and we will be getting into that space more and more.
Got it. And my next question is, what aspect of our traditional design industry frustrates you the most?
Oh, where do we begin to tell the story? Um, let's see. It's hard to put your finger on it, right? It's for me, it was, yeah, you go to, I would just go to the office and I would do the stuff that you do as an architect. So you draw some plans, you maybe make some models, you talk to some friends about where the pipes are. But somehow the cumulative psychological impact that that has on you on a daily day basis, when you get to 2, 3, 4 years into doing it, it's quite negative. Part of me still doesn't really know why. I think it's just maybe the frustration of long hours, the fact that projects just takes years to be done, the fact that many of us come out of school excited about ideas and concepts, and then they are nowhere to be found in actual practice. Or the fact that concept just takes 2 weeks and then it takes the next 2 years in which you just count doors and bricks. And a lot of us are not made for that in a way. So I guess so maybe that is what frustrates me the most, I guess, is I feel like there's not enough support for architects entering the market in that allows them to, that offers them ways to figure out what's appropriate for them. And on one hand, I'm a big advocate for what I call being post-disciplinary. So just do everything. Code, develop, be an architect, physical, real, just do it all. We're architects. We can figure everything out. But on the other hand, I think there should be more help in helping young architects figure out this kind of stuff. Are you the kind of person that can spend 2 to 3 years, which is how long it takes to get a medium-sized building done, doing door schedules and window schedules? Like, do you have the kind of personality type that just does door and window schedules for 2 to 3 years? Because if the answer is no, don't even try it. Like, you're going to be miserable. So there, I feel there's not enough conversation, there are not enough tools to help people understand these kind of facets, and you come to this, you stumble upon this knowledge after suffering a little bit, and maybe that's not necessary.
I see. And I see that like when we graduate, we have like such an immense excitement that we're gonna build concepts and we're gonna see our vision turning into reality. And then the industry offers a whole different experience. And depending on what kind of firm you join, what kind of projects you do, it's a different experience. So if I just had a thought that uh, if one of the core reasons of people doing architecture is like to do like conceptual designs and development, but the physical reality is imposing limits on the duration and the things we can do, maybe they can try out a lot of different concepts in virtual worlds and like have that sense of creativity flowing with short feedback time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's about, it's super cheesy, but it's just really about knowing the kind of person you are and then knowing the kind of architect that you are, and being able to put your finger on what makes you unhappy and why in the profession. Because once you have a handle on that, then it's very easy. But unfortunately, there's no support in this direction in architecture school. You're kind of completely on your own. You struggle a lot, and then there is just the pressure to do what is supposedly the right thing to do is so high, right? So get a good job that pays as much as possible in a company that's as famous as possible, right? Um, and then you're super happy when you get that, and then a few years into it, you're still not that happy for some mysterious reason, and then no one is helping you really figure it out, because it's not like you can go to your boss and be like, hey, I'm not so happy here. So yes, what you're saying could work if the person is able to try all those things and recognize quite fast what it is that fits them. Because I also know people who love to try out different things. This is their mantra, right? I love to try out different things, which is great, as long as there is some kind of timeline. And at the end of that, please do figure out after trying a lot of things what it is that you actually want to do. You just trying out a lot of things as a general strategy forever just doesn't work either.
I see. And I think like that's a great piece of advice, because people do transitions, but they do after a long, like after many years, they try out another like field or position. But if I see sometimes in like product companies where they have like first 2 years, every 3 months you try out different role and find how the whole cycle works, what are like different roles and responsibilities. And also that might be a way where one could resonate with one particular role and pursue that. So uh, I wanted to know, like, if you can throw some light about how you developed this whole app, like what was the tech stack and the technologies used?
It's Unity and as the main development platform, and then just the usual strategy, I guess, from an architect's perspective about software development. So you just do an MVP, a minimum viable product. You have some kind of strategy about testing it. You pick some pilot projects, and then we're actually right in the middle of having just starting to build a website for it and having a public wiki about it and bug report form. So if any of you are interested in testing it or just have any ideas, so we are at the phase now where we have something that works, we have something that we're using for projects, and we want to build a bit of a community around it where people just give us their feedback about where they see this going, because as I was saying, there's so many different ways of designing. So I'm super excited about seeing how different people do this. Like we had someone try it who starts a design by sketching things. So I don't start a design by sketching things. I started a design by building a car. I used to before this by building a cardboard model. So I approach this application very differently because I'm trying to make it the virtual equivalent of a cardboard model. But then this person tested it who is always just sketching the beginning, the initial ideas. And she had a completely different take on how the entire workflow and how it should be. Then I love Rhino, right? Like, I mean, I think a lot of us are just in love with the Rhino. So while I gave up the cardboard model, so the cardboard model for me has been replaced by this application, I still haven't given up Rhino. So I'm thinking of organizing layers and workflow in terms of Rhino because I'm still taking that. I'm taking the workflow that Rhino has taught me and I'm trying to put it in this new thing. But actually, that's not great because I should be more open-minded about it. I should not take over a workflow that has been that I've been channeled towards by the structural organization of Rhino. I should actually throw that out of the window and try to start from scratch, but that's super hard. So we started to give this application to test to very young designers. I'm very interested in how someone right out of school that doesn't have a sedimented relationship and workflow with a program, although they might know how to use Rhino, how they would approach this environment. Because yeah, I'm old enough to have had an entire life as a designer before VR and to have my ways of designing that are really embedded in me. So I'm very excited about having a cross-generational approach in how we test this application and how we generate ideas about where we take it next.
I see. I think I might be the right candidate for this testing because I just graduated, and so yeah, I would be happy to like give my feedback and test the application. So just to confirm, so in order to like, let's say if you had like an interface in the app, is it like some built-in functions provided by Unity, or you had to code in C#? And how also you deploy the app? Is it like publishing on a platform, or yeah?
So we coded everything from scratch, and we will deploy. So right now we are building for the Oculus Quest, which is a Facebook headset, and there is a what's called a release channel for testers. So we can add to that release channel the username that you have on your device, and then it will automatically show up in your library. So that's what we're going to do for the first few hundred testers. So what is called a closed beta. And when we come out of that, then we go into an open beta. And then we will put it on a platform that has an app installed on your Quest, and then you can download it through that app, and then it will be on your local device. And then the last step, but that's far in the future, hopefully we get there, is to have the application available on the official store in the headset.
I see. So it for early beta is just like invite only access, and it will show up in the.
Yeah.
So I assume like once the app is ready, you need to like some way connect to the store and upload the whole package or extension.
Yes, so this is when we go, so we go through closed beta, open beta, and then that would be the last step to go to the process of getting approval into an official store.
I see. I know like we are a bit over time, so I have few light questions to end the interview. So, how does a day in your life look like?
Um, Lately, quite crazy. Lately, it's been complete insanity. We're going through a lot of growth right now and a lot of changes. We have two very, very big projects that we're working on right now, in addition to quite a few small projects. So it's it's quite insane. Basically, I have very long days. I work on the weekend. I work in the evening. I mean, I love every minute of it, as you noticed earlier. But it is extremely tiring. I in one day in like in on any day of the week, I would have at least 3 to 4 calls. I would have 2 3 hours of work sessions with a team. I would spend about 2 hours answering emails, about 2 hours actively working on projects myself. So I call it getting my hands dirty. So I still like to actually get into doing things or modeling stuff in Rhino myself to solve real things or get a better idea of the problem. And then I also do quite a lot of events and presentations, and the bigger conferences that I do have a topic, so I can't just reuse the same presentation. So usually every 2 3 days I would be working for 1 2 3 hours on making a presentation for like a new conference topic.
Oh my God! So that's a lot of things, and this kind of stress, I assume it's more exciting than the stress in traditional architectural jobs. So, uh, the next question I have is like, uh, if you can talk briefly about your business plan and what is your advice for architects who are considering a VR-based startup?
So the first question, it's easier to answer. Our plan is to continue to be stubborn about what we do and continue to find way to place ourselves in the market without changing what we really want to do to make it more digestible to an audience that to I'm gonna be mean now, but to the kind of audience that gets excited about Ready Player One, which is the kind of audience that just sees these cliches and then just like jumps into it. So what we do is hard to explain. We're still figuring out. We're still like always redesigning our website, right? Because we're like the website is supposed to be how we present ourselves, and what do we say there? And we're still always changing stuff, and we're still not there yet, because I still have people emailing me saying, Andrea, I didn't understand anything. What the heck is that you're doing? I went to your website, like I read stuff. I'm completely lost. You're gonna lose clients that way, because maybe someone needs some kind of training for a tractor and your website is just completely gonna confuse them. So the strategy is to continue to improve our message and our positioning, but to not give up the core of what it is that we're doing, which is develop spatial experiences across realities and from us architects. So that's super important to me, that we are bringing a unique perspective to XR because we're architects and because we think about everything as architects. So that's kind of the general strategy. And in terms of advice, I don't give advice, because there were many times in my life when people gave me advice and they were really wrong. So I'm very worried about advice. And there are few occasions when I listened, that I ended up regretting. Eventually I did do what I wanted to do, but in the moment I listened to these people, and I still remember that feeling. So I think you should only, I think advice should only be personalized and should only come from a person, from someone that takes the time to understand who you are and what's right for you. Everything else is bullshit. Like I just, yeah.
I see. I feel that like so advice is to listen to your heart and yeah, because like if you're doing something radically new, like people based on their past experience will say something which doesn't align with your vision and values. So
I mean, okay, so I guess there are two things I could say that would sound like advice. Try to contact people directly and find people that can have the time and the willingness to understand who you are, and then advise you from a position of knowledge, not about who they are and what worked for them, but a position of knowledge about who you are. Because as we said earlier many times, like people's minds and what they need and what makes them happy just vary widely, and all these people throwing advice left and right just because they've reached some kind of definition of success really has nothing to do with you. And it's probably just not going to fit either your situation or what makes you happy. And then my other non-advice advice would be to just say that, like, we live in a time of just unprecedented pace of change. And I know this has been peddled for many, many years. I mean, of course, the world is always in crisis, something is always going on, things are always changing. But in the past few years, I mean, things have gotten nuts. And that cannot be understated. So right now, everything is being turned upside down, not in terms of the pace of technological advancements, but in terms of what counts in society as positions of authority, for example. So people who come out of school, I feel like they're still too easily influenced by fancy architecture names and big companies and what they stand for. But that's on their way out. I mean, it's this idea that you would have some kind of mammoth of a company that's been successful, that's still doing what made them successful 30 years ago, trying to kind of change and kind of adapt and kind of do hipster stuff. So it's so just, what do I want to say? Just take that with a grain of salt and be critical and try to find a way to start life in this kind of extremely hard environment where there are no more clear standards and safe ways and big companies that can never fail and that will offer you a cushy career and all of that stuff. So that's much less the case today than it was maybe 20 years ago.
I see. And I also like see that in like startup versus big companies, sometimes because it has been successful in the past, people are sometimes resistant to new ideas and radical new workflow of doing things. So cool. And you have stayed in US, Europe, and so I want to know like what what city or country is in your travel list or bucket list?
Argentina and Japan.
Oh, nice. And like, is it because of food culture or anything specific?
Um, I think it's culture. It's culture. So when I grew up, this is totally inconsequential detail about architecture, but I'll throw it there anyway. When I grew up, I loved this Argentine writer called Ernesto Sabato. So, and Borges, you're probably more familiar with Borges. But I really, yeah, so Borges is like the king. But I love Ernesto Sábado, and I really felt this affinity towards Argentinian culture for some weird way. So it's on my list, and I think I'm going there next year if everything is cool with COVID. And then Tokyo and Japan because I grew up watching anime. So I'm completely obsessed with Akira and just Japanese anime. So yeah.
I see. And any book, video, or movie which made a big impact in your life?
Akira. Akira, yes. I'm completely obsessed with Akira. End of Evangelion. So End of Evangelion, there's the anime series, but there are also two or three movies even that are on Netflix right now. So I watch and rewatch that again. It's just mind blowing. And then aside from that, Tarkovsky, who is a Russian filmmaker director, and he did a lot of the movies and the ideas that then Stanley Kubrick stole, like Solaris and cool stuff like that. So I when I need inspiration about what I do, I actually watch either Akira or Tarkovsky.
I see. And do you remember the name of the Netflix movies you were referring
Oh,
to?
it's just End of Evangelion, and then they have something at the end, like some kind of thing. But if you search for End of Evangelion, you will get the movies and the series. Hopefully, they're still there.
Awesome. I think that's it. Is there anything which we didn't cover in this interview you would like to share?
No, nothing comes to mind. I think we were pretty thorough.
Yeah, it was amazing interview. I really enjoyed, and it was so exciting to see your work, your philosophy, and thoughts. So, thanks a lot for sharing.
Thank you so much. I had a really good time. Thank you.
All right. Have a nice day. Thanks a lot, everyone, for attending and asking questions.